Nintendo Switch USB-C port. These are extremely easy because looking at this port, the only contacts you're going to have to solder are these right here. We will want to apply flux to this and leaded solder to it and use hot air. When soldering, you got to keep in mind that, well, not soldering, but hot air. When you're using hot air, you got to make sure that you're kind of looking at the board, seeing what you need to keep the hot air away from and what direction to face it towards. So looking at this, you can see that there's just a coil over here, some water damage items, which we'll throw through the ultrasonic cleaner when we're done. Yeah, that one's pretty rough. There's this big shield over here, which I'm going to assume that the CPU is under, considering that the thermal paste is above it as well. So we are going to want to put some heat sinks, which you can use pennies, nickels, quarters, any kind of metals that you could put on it. We use an actual block of steel to do it, to give it a larger thermal mass. That way you're not floating components. So like I said before, what we want to go ahead and do is apply leaded solder to this to reduce the melting point of this contact. And then we're going to put a new charge port on this device. Alright, so I have my welder soldering station set to 450 Celsius. And it's pretty universal. That's what I use most of the time. Different soldering stations is different. If you get a cheaper version, it's most likely going to need to do a higher air, or not air, but Celsius, due to the really low grade heating elements inside of it. Alright, so let me get my air on, because I don't want to be breathing this. It's really unhealthy. And I have my soldering station already set. Alright. So go ahead and apply it to the tip. Make sure you put a pretty good amount. And we're just going to want to run it across these contacts. Make sure each one are extremely shiny. And it looks like we're good. We're going to want to apply it to these larger contacts, which we need to put flux on. Alright, and make sure you load this down because, like I said, with ground there's a pretty large thermal mass, so it takes a lot more heat. So the more leaded solder you apply, the less heat it's going to take. Alright. So it looks like we're good. If you're looking at the contacts in the back, you can see they're shiny. There's solder on it. All the 4 ground points, there's quite a bit of solder on it as well. We will want to go ahead and any contacts that has corrosion, discoloration, that looks like it could be potentially water damage. I think we're going to go ahead and hit it with the soldering iron before we put it in ultrasonic cleaner. So I currently have my hot air station, set to 365, which is pretty universal. I'm going to set it to 60 air, which you want to try to go with 3/4 to 4/5 of your max airflow. Most stations is 100, so in this situation I'm gonna go with 60. Each air station has its own personalities, so they're all different. So you kind of got to play around with it until getting the right amount. Alright, so we're going to go through a circular motion on this contact. Once you start seeing the solder melt, we're kind of just going to lift up on it. Keep in mind, never to pry. Prying is not good. If you gotta force something, obviously it's not ready. It's going to take a large amount of air, so it's going to take probably 30 to 50 seconds to get this off. Reason being is it's a large charger port, so it's going to take a lot more heat due to thermal mass. Yeah, it looks like we got movement. When you're getting a board this hot, be careful not to hit anything else. Because as you can see, like this right here, it's got movement. So you can really float a lot of components, so you gotta be very careful. Alright, so that charger port is actually off, so that part's done. I consider that the hardest part, to be honest, because, you know, the unleaded solder's on it. We are going to, let's see. Let's go ahead and apply solder to this so we can get this all cleaned up. Alright. And also, you know, I want to thank you for signing up for Tier 1 training. We do have Tier 2, which we're currently working on, so it's going to take a little time. We're going to offer MacBook repairs as far as laptop, desktop, all the repairs that you're not going to find anywhere else. We do offer one-on-one training, which is normally about, you know, $300-400 a day, where we can supervise you, give you tips, lifetime, you know, all the good stuff. So there is some through-hole contacts on this, so it's really important to get all the solder out of this. Otherwise, if you don't, it's not going to sit flush. That's the important part of actually using leaded solder and drowning it in it. That's really going to help with the melting point on these. Alright, so like before, when you completely get your solder braid full, you know, the first thing you want to do is go ahead and cut it off. And the last thing you need to do is you know, start dragging around solder. Alright, so it looks like we just have a couple more. Alright, go ahead and clean that again. If you try it multiple times and you can't get all the solder off, pretty easy trick is to flip it over and get it from that side. Because what it is your iron can't reach all the way down there. So pretty easy to just flip her over and tackle it like that. So it's having a hard time melting. Anytime you get that sign, let's throw solder on it, because most likely it didn't get the other side of solder applied. So we're going to want to get that taken care of. There we go. Sorry about the background noise. You just keep flipping it over on each side to get contact until it's all up. So a lot of times these can be pretty stubborn. If that doesn't work, I normally take a X-Acto knife and hey, it looks like I think we floated this one. We're gonna have to check that out before we call it good. Like I said, even the best people can float things. Alright, so it looks like it's the best we're going to get it. So what we're going to do, let's go ahead and apply some hot air along with the hot air and a X-Acto knife. So we are going to go with 365 with 60 air. And what you're going to do, as soon as you see the solder melt, you stick your X-Acto knife in, remove the air until it hardens, and then you pull your knife out. And normally what you can do is you push that solder to the other side, and then you can wick it off. So what we do is keep that in there. Gotta wiggle it back before it dries. As you can see, it's all the way through now, so what we're gonna do is flip her over and see it push the solder through. So what you do is go ahead and wick it off now. And then we're good. Looks like we just have one more contact that's just not quite like I want it. So we are going to go ahead and tackle that real quick, doing the same method that I just showed you. So as you can see, it's this one right here. The others are good. A lot of people probably wouldn't approve this method, but it is very effective and it doesn't damage anything. So I don't see what the big deal is. So as it hardens, just wiggle it around. As you can see, it's actually good now. Alright, so I think we're ready to go ahead and move to the next step, which would be applying the port. So I do want to show you something. A lot of ports are really easy, but there is things that you want to watch out for. So I'll get this all cleaned up real quick. Alright, so let's go. So if you make messes or you float items, the general rule is go ahead and fix them before you move forward with the original repair. So what's going to happen is you're going to forget that you did it, and when you put it back together, it's not going to work, and you're going to be curious to why that is, and it'll be some time when you realize you forgot something. So I'm pretty confident that this component was floated, so let's check real quick. So the orientation of these kind of components, which it looks like it's a filter, is not a big deal. Reason being is they're just essentially a wire from one side to the other side. Yeah, see, I did float it. Easy as that. Heat it up, use your tweezers to move it back in place. And kind of clear things up real quick for you. Alright, sorry about the display. Let's go ahead and get this all cleaned up real quick. So when you're putting the Nintendo Switch back together, it is extremely important to make sure you apply new thermal paste. Alright, so what we want to do, so we're going to go ahead and flip this port over just to verify that it's going to make contact with the bottom contacts. And I'll show you what I mean by that here in a minute. Alright, so these contacts right here, when you put this port on, it's actually going to be hidden. So looking at this, you can tell that it will be making contact. So what that means is you can't just apply the port and use your soldering iron. You're going to have to use hot air as well. And with hot air, you got to be very, very careful, because you can melt the plastic and essentially ruin your port. So, like I've said before, what you want to do is apply flux and leaded solder. Leaded solder is essential. With this, it's going to make your heating, the amount of heat you got to apply, less. It's a lower heating point, and it's really going to make contact with these points a lot easier for you. So, I'm going to take a micro pencil, which I am currently using a JBC dual station, which there's a lot of other stations out there that's just as good. I'm kind of particular. So you don't have to apply a lot of solder, but you do want little pillows, as I would say. These front ones aren't really important. Reason being is you can come back and hit them with the soldering iron, but the back ones you're really going to want to be keeping an eye on. Alright. So this has a little solder in there. I just want to kind of clean up a little bit. And also, while you guys are doing your training, if you see other content that you would really like to see from me, feel free to let me know, because we're always looking to add new content on our training. And of course, it won't be in any additional cost. We just want to keep it valuable for everyone to join and give them a reason to stay and spread the word. Alright, so we don't need that through hole too good. Reason being is we're applying hot air anyways. Once you apply the hot air, it's going to melt that. Your port's going to fall in place. So essentially the trick to get this port in there and not really destroy things is hot air. I'm going to be using 365 or 60 air JBC station. The idea is to keep the air moving constantly. You don't want to stop, because if you stop at one point, you can melt the plastic, which you don't want to ruin your port. So let's go ahead and move forward with getting this on there. So make sure you got flux, which I still have some leftover flux. Just get this put on there real quick. So as you can tell, it's not really setting too flush. Reason being, we put little pillows on those contacts, which is, to be seen. It's normal. When you put this on with the hot air, make sure you get nice and flush with, the contacts and everything. You really don't want a crooked port. So what we're going to do is apply hot air, keep it going. Do not stay in one spot, otherwise you will burn the plastic. So remember, large thermal mass. It's going to take a minute to get where it needs to be. You can see it moving. So just hold it down. As you can see, it's not good yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and increase the air to 100. But you got to be very careful about doing this, because you can overheat it. What I'm going to do also is I'm going to go ahead and apply some solder to this large contact. Reason being is once I press it down, it'll hold it down. So there we go. I kind of tacked it in place. I don't want it perfect yet. So let's go ahead and apply the air again. Yeah, so it's got a wiggle to it. It looks like it's pretty flush now, so what we're going to do is hold it down. So leave it on for about 20 seconds. So it looks pretty flush, so let me just pick it up for a minute to look at it. Yeah, so looking at it, you can tell. Here, let me get you guys a better view. Sorry, it's taking a second. Alright. Well, it's pretty flush. It's making contact. The solder's flowed. If you look at the front is pretty flush as well. So it's kind of how you want it to look. You want everything touching the board, set and flat. But as funny as it is, I think when he sent this board in, the initial reason that was wrong with it, I don't think it was the port. I think it was probably a corrosion with some contacts. So I went ahead and changed it because that's what I quoted them anyways. So
I can't be in the video.
go ahead and apply flux again. Want everything to flow good. Alright, so let's go ahead and get that solder all the way around. We want a nice flat surface, applied nice and even. So I just add a little tiny ball, which that's too much. A little tiny bit, so there we go. So what you do, you just kind of touch it, gradually touch it. I'm going to use the larger soldering iron now. Oh, sorry about that. Reason being is, remember, you're dealing with the larger thermal mass, so you're going to need something that can put out a lot more heat than, a micro pencil. So let's go ahead and get this first contact. There we go. So it's really important to have enough solder on your actual ground contacts, And it's not about just having a solid ground connection, which that is important. But you got to remember that this is the charge port, and you're going to be pressing in a charger in and out, in and out. There's probably going to be kids that's playing on the game system while it's plugged in, so there's going to be a bend to it. So the more solder you have on that contact, the more unlikely it is to break. So you're going to want to keep that in mind when you are working on this. So we're just going to clean this up, and it should conclude our video. So let's get it cleaned up real quick. So we are going to put this through an ultrasonic cleaner, so I don't have to have it perfect. But while you're on here with me, how about we look over some of these, bad corrosion points. So looking at this, there's a corrosion on that component, and you can tell that it's had water exposure. Which it looks like this is, let's see. From the looks of it, this might be a digitizer and power. Alright. So, when you're cleaning these, it's kind of like a scrubbing motion that you want to do. Alright. So I'm going to put this big Thermomass on here, which is, like I said, just a steel block. You don't have to, but it kind of helps hold things down. Alright. So with this chip being so small, I'm just going to use this micro pencil. And just kind of run it across. Make sure you cause no bridges. If you do, it's not a big deal. Just take some wick to it. It's harmless. So before I look at them contacts and make sure there's no bridges, I'm just going to take this big soldering iron real quick. And I'm going to apply some solder on this. So I can't get all the way down to the base, so let's try the soldering pencil. Yeah, it looks like that'll work. Alright, so let's clean this up and see if we have any leftover residue from the chip that we just messed with. So we do have some bridges, which let me zoom in real quick. So it says 5 contacts right there. So there's a slight bridge. Like I said, not a big deal. You're not going to be perfect on first try. If you do ever get to that point, it's going to take a while to get to that. And even then, it's not a big deal. Mistakes happen. So we're just going to get this in there. Use a micro pencil. So we got her all good. There's no corrosion. I'm just kind of hitting these points real quick to make sure there's no movement. Alright. So there is a couple more spots real quick. This can kind of concerning. So it's this large cap on top of that side of the chip again. Give me one moment. Alright, so let's see. After looking again, those points don't look too bad on this side. The only thing I'm worried about is this large capacitor. So what we'll do, we'll go ahead and hit that again. And the corrosion, with the looks of it, it's not necessarily corrosion. It could just be oxidation, which not too much of a deal. But I'm kind of a perfectionist, so I really don't want it to look like bad. So, let's see. We're going to look around the board and see if we can find some other stuff. So that stuff you're looking at is just thermal paste. It got kind of messy when I was taking off the stuff. Alright, so that connector is definitely going to be an issue because that's part of the LCD. So let's see. We are going to apply thermal paste. Now I'm going to do it on both sides because I noticed that it's issues over. Alright. Alright, so the idea is to make sure that, its pads are making contact with these pins, which is going to be really hard to see if it is with this oxidation. Then most likely is definitely an issue, so I'm not really worried about any bridges. I just want to get this clean and then I'll use some wick if I have to. So I'll use some braid. It's got some bridges right there, so we're just going to clean those off real quick. And when you're messing with client stuff, please don't leave flux all over the place or components just all over. The idea is to treat your clients good and have word of mouth to talk about how good you are. So you definitely want to do a good job. That's why we ultrasonic everything we touch. That way it's nice and clean when we get back. And later down the road, if you don't, a lot of times you can actually have corrosion and damage from the leftover flux depending on what you use. So it looks like everything's good now. It's the only thing's concerning, so I think we're good. Alright, so like I said, if there's some videos you guys would like to see or content you don't see out on the web, just please make sure it relates to cell phones, game systems, computers. We'll be glad to cover it. It doesn't even have to be micro soldering. We can do anything from installing operating systems, software support, pretty much anything that you've seen out there, we can figure it out. So all you gotta do is go on our forums and post a general question about kind of what you want to see, or you can actually just give us an email at Sean.Blair@blairstech.com, and we'll get back with you as soon as we can. I really appreciate you guys watching our videos and supporting us. It's you guys that keep small businesses like us in service. So thank you and have a great day.